So Rod, you want to do this now?
Sure.
Okay.
Just as a sort of segue from the last thing, because I'm dealing with sound with moving image. I found the name of the guy who transferred the Kineto, which was a cylinder soundtrack accompanying a motion picture and shot by the Thomas Edison Company, or Edison himself. The fellow was Walter Murch, who was with Lucasfilms, and
oh, he's very famous, both as a director and a sound designer.
Yeah. So and in his presentation to AES, he pointed out that the microphone was in the picture. So
MURCH, I think, if anybody wants to look.
Yeah, MURCH. Yeah, he's very, very famous, both in sound design and directing, and yeah, I've met him before too. It's good.
Anyway, okay, let me share screen and. So I'm hoping you can see all of this. The topic. Yep. The presentation was loudspeaker placements for audio monitoring and high definition electronic production. Okay, and so here is the RP173 as it was originally proposed, and there is the speaker layout. You notice the angles between the speakers and the screen, and this mysterious little thing that says 3H, and H stands for the height of the screen, and I will move that over to here. 3 picture heights back. And I looked at this when I first saw it, and I said, this doesn't look like the way that the motion picture industry has mixed multi-channel sound historically. Certainly going back to Cinerama, of course, which has 5 loudspeakers behind the screen. And you can see in this PDF that I have sitting here, and I should perhaps magnify it a little bit. Is everyone seeing this all right? Is this not too
Yeah,
small?
we're seeing 3 items. From the left, there's a plain text, bunch of details. Then there's the center page.
Yeah.
You're moving now, and then there's the proposed.
There's Cinerama, and which Michael Todd was associated with, and he didn't like it for some reasons that I will point out shortly. And so he went to Tadeo, which is also a curved screen with 5 loudspeakers behind the screen, and some processing involved. You'll notice this angle 128 degrees as the arc of the screen. And the projector here is really the camera operator's point of view for the picture. And both of these processes were heavily funded by the United States Navy, stemming from World War II, because in the case of Cinerama, or the Waller manual gunnery training system, training anti-aircraft gunners to shoot down enemy fighter jets, or fighter propeller planes, no jets really in those days. These processes were essentially point of view cinematography, and that meant that the person who was being trained as an anti-aircraft gunner was sitting in the camera operator's position. So here we go. Anyway, here is the speaker setup. You may know this from other things that you've seen that's been published by AES and SMPTE and ITU and such. 3 screen heights back, is that a legitimate position to be from? Here is SMPTE 2002, RP 173 2002, and believe it or not, SMPTE charged me $50 for this piece of paper. The other one just came with my SMPTE journal. So 3 screen heights, well, is that legitimate? Okay, here is, this is extracted from an article by Sean McCarthy showing your blind spots at the edge of the screen. And even from my own experience, I'm going to go over to my notes. Back when I was in high school, a 16mm movie projector came with a 2-inch lens on it. That's 50mm for those who are not metric. And if you were sitting halfway between the projector and the screen, you were about 3.39 screen heights back from the screen. The projector itself is roughly 6 to 7 screen heights back. And if you were projecting on a wall with an inferior lamp house or a 500-watt bulb instead of a kilowatt bulb in the projector, at the edges of the frame, you were seeing your own blind spots, and it's very distracting, which is a good sales point for a good bright picture, but still. Okay, moving on. This is part of the commentary that I wrote, that I sent in when I issued the commentary for the standard when it was first proposed. And electronic high definition production, this is the TV safe area, and you can tell we're still in the era of cathode ray tube, even in high definition television, 16:9. All right, based on that, 3 screen heights back, you look at this line going up the center here. I have one, imagine this perpendicular to the picture. So there's 1 screen height, 2 screen heights, 3 screen heights. And here are the positions of the loudspeakers as you might have seen them in the standard RP173. Are you following my arrow decently enough? I hope. There is the left channel, there's the right channel. The center, of course, is probably somewhere else, but not in the middle of the cathode ray tube in that instance. Whereas, and let me go back to the blind spots. Here's the 15 degrees at 3 screen heights back. There's your blind spot. This line right here would have been the edge of a 3x4 picture image right here, right there. Okay. And so, as I say, 3 screen heights is probably a pretty good position for sitting, except that the standard itself refers to as that as the listening position rather than the viewing position. Very strange, but okay. Going on, this is the ITU standard, which is very similar. You notice the 30 degrees to the left and the right of center. This thing, the ITU standard, came as accompaniment to an SACD disc. There was a gal, Marjorie Schmugler. This is out of Mix magazine. She is giving the positions to the left and to the right of the center as being 21 degrees, the listener's positions relative to the loudspeakers. Okay. However, and I'm going to blow this up a little bit. This is the formula that the motion picture industry has traditionally used for the placements of the speakers to the left and to the right of center. The distance between the speakers is equal to the screen width plus 10% or minus 0 divided by the number of speakers, in this case 3. CinemaScope, when it was introduced, was a 3-speaker system. And they're saying at an aspect ratio of 2.55 to 1 for the picture frame, the speakers should be 0.85 times the picture height to the left or right of the center line. And of course, it goes on to tell about how those speakers should be placed behind the screen, in that the high frequency drivers should be probably pointing straight out, whereas the low frequency drivers could be towed in some. Let's see. Now let me get out of that and move on. By the way, that comes from the Audio Cyclopedia by Howard Tremaine, who was one of the co-developers of Fantasound for Walt Disney productions of Fantasia. This is Cinerama, and 5 speakers behind the screen. These are the points where the various projectors overlap. And as it turns out, these 2 speakers are to the left and right of center about 30 degrees. And the extreme left and extreme right are about 60 degrees from this point in the middle, which would be the camera operator's perspective. There is the Cinerama layout. That 35 feet here is the distance from the center projector to the crossover point. The distance to the screen is 60 feet. Simple addition, 35 plus 25 is 60. So, and this position here, you'll notice it's in the front row. Such as that works out. This was one of the justifications for CinemaScope in terms of the field of view. And Mr. Joseph Greenspan says, this is your view from about 2/3 back in the auditorium. However, I redrew this to show all of the 10-degree arcs right down to the center of the picture, and then redrew this to the current frame widths of the anamorphic cinematography presentations. And you will notice that right here we have 25 degrees for the 3x4, and about 50 degrees at the extreme for the left and the right of the frame. Okay, moving on. This is the to scale some of the various cinema formats. There's the Academy Aperture on 35 millimeter film. This is the break point for Cinerama. This larger frame here is the Cinerama frame laid flat. The bigger one is IMAX for what it's worth. CinemaScope 55 is also 6 perforations high on the projector, and CinemaScope 55, and so that's that frame, and that's coming out about 60 degrees. The CinemaScope 35, you'll notice I have 73 degrees here for Cinerama, so it's 146 in the arc. But to scale of a piece of 35 millimeter film, The edge of the cinemascope picture is about 50 degrees. Going back to Mr. Greenspan, 50 degrees. Okay. That's a Cinerama screen. Please forgive my crude drawing of it here, but this shows the placements. This is the crossover point. It is slightly more than one screen height back. And these darker blobs here on my arc are the speakers. That's the extreme left, the left of center, the center, extreme right, and I'm sorry, the left, the right of center and the extreme right. Here, these lines represent where the frames of the Cinerama projection process overlap. Going back to my little formula down here, the distance between the speakers and the screen width over the number of speakers, you'll notice I have them placed that way along the arc. By coincidence, if you are 2 screen heights back, those are the same placements as would be if laid on a flat surface or the chord of the arc. And in that position, that would be the left of, or the right of the extreme right, the right of center, the center, the left of center. You notice, boom, 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 and so on. And this is 2/3 back from the chord of the arc. This position here is 2/3 back the length of the auditorium from the screen. So that's an interesting point. I have to point out that a lot of audio measurements made in movie theaters are made from that 2/3 back position. And they mention that, but they don't mention anything about how many screen heights that's back or what your perspective is. As I say again, here is projector for the right panel, here is projector for the center panel, and I'm apologizing for my crude graphics here. And this is the projector for the left panel. And the projectors themselves would have 70 millimeter projection lenses for a 6 perforation high frame. And the projector is about 2.5 screen heights back from the screen. Okay. Getting back to this thing, here we go. Here are these positions right here. This would be 85% of screen height to the left and 85% screen height to the right. The angle is 19 degrees left or right of center. Marjorie Smuggler's little thing that I showed you from Mix Magazine, there's the 21 degree. Dolby Labs for their Dolby optical system says put the left and right speakers as far to the left and right of the center as you can get them still behind the screen. And that gets the best stereo for them. Moving on, that's how they mixed the big screen pictures. And I'll show this one as well. That's Oklahoma. This is Porgy and Bess. You'll notice the interesting VU meters they have right there underneath the screen. And as I mentioned, and then for the smaller studios, the left, center, right, there it is behind the screen. Is that 60 degrees to the left or to the right? Or 30 degrees, I'm sorry, to the left and right for a 3-channel system? Is the mix guy sitting 3 screen heights back? That's a good question. But anyway, that's the way it's done in the motion picture industry. And here are some clips of film, and I will blow this up. This is a mag optical print for CinemaScope, or an anamorphic print that is widescreen with magnetic soundtracks. And there are the mag tracks. And I said mag optical. If your magnetic heads aren't working or worn out, the infrared of the exciter lamp will shine right through the magnetic oxide, and you can get your optical sound that way as the backup. Just a couple of other examples. There is, of course, an anamorphic test frame. Up here is a mono track that might be used by an editor when editing film soundtracks. This is 70mm print film. That's cinema digital sound introduced by Eastman Kodak. It lasted about a year, and then all the guys who were working on that went over to Sony, and it became SDDS, which doesn't really work all that great, as I have been told. And on the edge here is Dolby Digital. For what it's worth, then this thing with the time code track on the inside of the optical soundtrack is for DTS, which is being the soundtrack is synchronized from in a computer from sound files using that. So onwards, I don't know, maybe you recognize some of this. That was ripped out of some damaged film by a friend of mine who was a projectionist in a motion picture theater here in Portland. And that's from the movie Exodus. So these are full coat magnetic recording film. This one in particular is interesting because it is using CinemaScope perforations, which are much smaller than, and it's called CS 1870. That 0.187 inches is the distance between each perforation, and it's long pitch. However, the polyester is short pitch at 0.1866 inches between perforations, and that's triacetate. And then we have Bell and Howell perforations, which are rounded on the sides, and on the left is unexposed film. That's at least it doesn't have any. It's undeveloped if it had any images on it, and the other is black leader that would probably be used in the process of editing. So okay, onward. And these are some film strips that are used to check the resolution of film scanners converting film to digital video, including the anamorphic test film. And the jitter and weave is on the extreme right, and then the others are for resolution tests. The magenta is considered the top layer of the emulsion and has supposedly the sharpest image available. CinemaScope 55 is in this. These were the formats and developed in the late 50s to help motion pictures compete with television. And but that's the way that CinemaScope 55 was actually released. And that this up on the top is the camera, would have been the camera original, and on the bottom is the reduction print. 6 perforations high with 6 channels of magnetic sound rather than the 4 that original CinemaScope had. And I didn't know that this was the way it was done, but some of the information in the reference I cited for it showed this frame that did not match what I'd seen on top in the in this. And I went to a fella at a SMPTE meeting, John Mosley, who had some experience with that. I was introduced to him by John Belton, who was one of the controlling editors for SMPTE, and John Mosley confirmed that I made the correct guess that that was what it was. So anyway, I mentioned this thing about Michael Todd having been associated with Cinerama, and there were things about it that he didn't like photographically. He wanted something that came out all out of the same hole. So this is what emerged from that. He went to this had been under development by the United States Navy to replace the Waller gunnery trainer with a single projector, and the gunnery trainer actually used 5 projectors. And there are still point of view processes. I mean, this is 22. This is photographed with a 22 millimeter lens on 70 millimeter films, very wide angle. And the rectification here was because they were projecting downwards on a slope towards the motion picture screen, and they had to correct for that. And it was never really very good. But at least it had a single vanishing point. And for the photographers in the audience, if you're familiar with that, it is this. With BC up there, I would tell you before Cinerama. Before Cinerama, you had one vanishing point like that. When Cinerama came along, you had 3 of them. And of course, if you want to be politically correct and call it BCE, then that would be before Cinema and Edison. But anyway, there's the punchline. So can I offer you any questions at this point? I can go back and explain the Tadeo a little more, which gets into another interesting story, but this is what you do with sound film, sound print film, when you have nothing better to do and it's obsolete and tossed in you make these lovely bookmarks. Maybe I should open it up for questions at this point.
On that one, was the mag tracks actually on the outside of the sprockets?
Yes. I'll go back to it. There it is. And blow it up some more. Outside, inside, and these are CinemaScope perforations in here, which were made smaller so to make room for the soundtrack. The surround soundtrack is this really teeny 25 mil thing along the other side. And then the rest of them are, I believe, 50 mils wide. And then they had smaller sprocket holes because those were there for 35 millimeter prints. And then going back to here, you can see the CinemaScope perforations. And this is a test film. And so this outside edge has things recorded on it, as does the inside edge, the inside. So anyway.
And that brings to mind the brief time in high school. So this would have been, in a previous millennium. We had, I remember when the theater installed the new sprocketing in the projectors so that we could do both the CinemaScope and the Academy standard perforations. And it was a stepped tooth on the sprockets that allowed that. We also had magnetic heads on top of the projectors to do the 4-channel. And then if my understanding was correct at the time, because it was not explained real well to me, that they also wound up using the optical track for something. But I don't recall what it was used for now. But yeah, the theater owner hated magnetic prints because they wore down the heads very quickly on playback. And about if we got a slew of magnetic prints come in, about every 4 to 6 months, we were supposed to send the heads out and have them relapped, and which we seldom did. And then optical, by that time I was leaving, and I don't think we saw a magnetic print in ages. And then the last I knew, that theater converted and was all digital.
Yeah. The one of the theaters that I trained in briefly, the projectionist was griping about the sprockets for the cinemascope because they weren't changing them out for the Kodak standard, and he felt that those were ripping up prints a lot more viciously than would otherwise be expected. Although supposedly the cinemascope perforations had more base material between the perforations, which was supposed to make them stronger. But anyway, I was going to pass along another little story about Tadeo. You notice the curvature of the screen is 128 degrees. And let me go back to my notes here. That was not the actual curvature of the screen. Cinerama was always, 146 degrees. And Ultra Panavision, which was a 70 millimeter process, was made to replace that with a single projector. And in fact, the one Cinerama movie, How the West Was Won, some of the last scenes in it were actually shot in Ultra Panavision, which was a 70 millimeter process, because the Cinerama camera was too cumbersome to do some of the action shots that they had on a railroad engine with people clinging on for their dear lives, but still. Okay, in Tadeo, there were 3 classes of prints. One was for projection angles from 0 to 10 degrees. That was a class 1 print. The class 2 print from 10 degrees to 15 degrees, and from 15 to 25 degrees was the class 3 print. And the frame I showed you somewhere here is a class 3 print. Come on, where are you? There we go. That is the class 3 print. And as I say, I didn't know initially about that angle at 128 degrees. So I made myself a little slide and stuck it in a Vulex projector, 2 3/4 inch by 2 3/4. And the projector itself has a 6.5 inch focal length lens. And in order to get a properly lined up picture, I had to tilt the projector down at an angle of, where is it here? I have it. Okay, here we go. The experimental, an angle of 30.75 degrees. That's the rake angle from the high in the balcony down to your screen. And the arc of the screen was only 78 degrees. There was some distortion. The aspect ratio reduced to 2.08 to 1 as opposed to 2.2 to 1 to 1, which is the actual aspect ratio of the 70 millimeter frame, according to SMPTE standards. The interesting thing about this is that the ideal for projection of the class 3 print is 26.57 degrees rake angle. And the tangent of that angle turns out to be 0.5. In other words, the elevation of the projector is half the distance to the screen, if you will. The elevation of the projector is half the distance to the screen. And at that angle, you can place a viewer at the center of the arc, elevated to an elevation half the height of the screen, and that picture, that projector beam, will shine over his head, and you can see this as a very accurate way of presenting a training process for an anti-aircraft gunner in the U.S. Navy. So you have the actual point of view of the cameraman available to the viewer. The Rivoli Theater, which was where Oklahoma was premiered, has a rake angle of 22 degrees, and I get that from John Belton, who wrote the article from which this picture is drawn in the PDF. And that meant that the projector had to have a 4.4-inch focal length lens, and the arc is 106 degrees, as it turns out. There are some other things in there that the arc was, well, a projector would be 131 feet back, or roughly 5 screen heights. And the ratio of the view at the center of the arc is, what am I saying here? It's 1.4. Okay, center of the arc. Okay. Anyway, going on to get the 128 degrees shown in the PDF here, where my arrow is pointing, you'd have to have a 3.3-inch focal length lens and the 17-degree rake angle. And that's for a class 3 print. In other words, the curvature of the screen, the focal length of the lens, and the rake angle of the projector are all interlocked and related. I was speaking with a gentleman by the name of Ed Lewis at an AES conference, who had been involved with the installation of Tadeo in the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. And I have been in that theater. Their projection booth has a rake angle of 9 degrees, which meant that they were probably using class 3 print, but just on the border. I'm sorry, a class 2 print, but that's right on the border. And he said the process of setting up that screen was a bit like the Polish joke of how many people does it take to change a light bulb. And so as not to offend the Polish people, which occasionally we've had one in our meetings, I will refer to it as how many SMPTE engineers does it take to focus a Tadeo projector. And that comes out to be one guy to adjust the lens and 20 people to move the screen back and forth until everything is in focus. And he said that they had to change the curvature of the screen 3 times to get it right, and the distortion was still so bad. He came up with the idea of adjusting the masking along the edges of the screen to follow the lines of distortion on the calibration films, in order to try to trick the audience into seeing the horizon of Oklahoma being straight rather than bowed upwards, which I'd seen Oklahoma here in Portland in its original release on a Tadeo screen, and the horizon of Oklahoma bowed upwards. In other words, it was the opposite of the actual curvature of the earth, and very distracting, if you will. And you paid money to see that. You paid extra
Yikes.
money to see that. So are there further questions before I stop my sharing here, I think?
Well,
I just remember how much.
Since you asked, actually, I just sent this in a message to Dan. It's fascinating stuff. What I'm trying to do, Rod, having come from briefly from a projection background, I'm trying to tie the loudspeaker loudspeaker placements with the incredibly, excruciatingly anal detailed camera lens and image placement positions that SMPTE sweated over, but apparently tried to tie in the loudspeaker positions too. So I guess I'm also venturing at this point, if we had multiple, if Todd AO had multiple prints based on the projector declination angle, did they also have different prints with different audio treatment to go with the change in perspectives they were creating?
As you see in the PDF here, 5 speakers behind the screen, the same as Cinerama down below.
So in theory, it tracks then, no matter what they do with the image.
When they're trying to mix those things, I mean, you know, there's the big screen, and a sound effect comes across the screen, and there are these, you know, five guys on the world's largest mixer, as it's been promoted, trying to follow the voice across the screen, or the sound effect across the screen, or as the door opens, they want a squeak to come out from that place on the screen where the hinges are.
Yes, we'd like our Foley over there, please.
Yeah, that's right.
So they mixed it live?
Yeah,
it's mixed to the projection.
They're mixing it while they're projecting it here. And yet the RP173 does not work with that. It does not work with that process. And because first of all, the viewing distance, second of all, the speaker placement. I mean, if you brought this this speaker placement, if you brought the screen to 1 screen height back, you'd be probably about right. Let's put it that way, but not 3 screen heights. But again, for the average person in a movie theater these days, 3 screen heights back or 2/3 back, do those match with one another? Nah, good question. And then there's the issue of the cinematographers. Cinematographers don't shoot with one lens. They shoot with
with whatever the budget allows.
Yes, and the large selection of perspectives. And those actresses want to look good on the screen, and you have to use longer lenses for them. And yet, I mean, Hollywood was very good in dealing with that, because they made the sets in forced perspective, where things that might be 10 feet away or 10 feet behind the actor or actress were reduced in size, so that they would look as though they had been shot with a shorter focal length lens, to give a bigger view of the scene. And for those of you who might remember having seen 2001, which was released as a Cinerama event, if you will, one of the times I went to see it, I saw it from the front row. And Stanley Kubrick seems to have paid a lot of attention to making that picture in behave as a Cinerama film. And so the editing of the scenes is very long, and it gives you time to look around and see the flies buzzing on the dead meat that the primitive human beings have just killed, and so on. And then you go take that home, look at it on your DVD from 3 screen heights back rather than 1 screen height back, and it's a dull movie. It just drags on too long, and so there's that aspect of the moving image in a motion picture theater that this standard does not contend very well with. And it was passed in 2002, proposed in 1993, withdrawn in September of 2011, and then reintroduced in 2014, but they're not going to make any changes to it. So what do I tell you?
So we have a standard that nobody's going to use.
That's, well, I would suspect that this is going to be the way student filmmakers are dealing with things, but for any precision sound panning for things like Foley or dialogue, if that's really going to be done. I did see Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight in Ultra Panavision in the local former Cinerama theater, and they should have had 5 speakers active behind the screen. They only had 3, and it just says this has not really been done in that tradition. So though I will hand it to the Foley editor or the Foley mixer, he did have the sound of a squeaking door where it should have been on the screen. And that was from my perspective, which I sat about halfway back when I saw that. So, okay.
I just remember how much fun it was aligning the C-scope lenses on those Bell & Howell 16mm projectors, so that when you did the changeover, the pictures didn't go kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I learned about watch for those cues. It's you see the first one up in the right hand corner of the screen. It flashes. You turn on your second projector, and when the second one happens, flip off the light on the flip off the one that's running and turn on the light that's on the other. So
yeah, my girlfriends used to hate me because I'd go to the theater and go, changeover.
Well, it's nice when you get an old print. And you got 4 sets of changeover marks on it.
Yeah.
A lot of people would ask me about that. I could run 16mm and in front of folks who were in to see a film in a church venue or something like that. How did you know when to turn on the other projector? There are cues on the film. Oh, all right.
What was fun in the old days when they would just take the film and transfer it to videotape, but you'd still see the transfers and they'd still miss them.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
The changeovers, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
they leave the header and trailer on it, to splice them together. You can watch the countdown.
Yeah.
Well, I saw a re-release of Lawrence of Arabia, which was a very bad print. I mean, the color actually was okay on it, but the soundtracks were all messed up. And whomever was projecting it, they'd done it as a changeover rather than put it on these big reels so you don't have to do that. And the poor projectionist, he missed one after the other. And then there were some of the reels were missing one channel of sound. And then there was another one that I remember which came up as 60 cycles on a right channel. and that lasted for the length of that reel. And then,
Oh,
and then
no.
the next one came on. Why did I? Okay, but I've seen it in 70 as a 70 millimeter print. So, okay. Anyway, that was the gist of the lecture, and as I say, I mean, I'm seeing student film productions every now and then that have been transferred to digital cinema packages, and they do need to pay attention to these things, and especially the stuff that was just recorded in stereo, which is a left and right speaker, and then they've got dialogue coming out of a phantom center. That's quite distracting. If you just turn your head slightly or move to the left or the right, suddenly that drifts to somewhere else. And it's if you're doing a digital cinema repack or transfer, at least have 3 channels, and at least have a center channel for your dialogue or your monologue or whatever. That's advice for student filmmakers who are probably not participating in this meeting at the moment. So, but anyway, this is something that if you are such as a student filmmaker or a low budget production operation, that beware the standard. It will not, it can mislead you if you use it, if you rely on it literally. So anything more? And we've got another 7 minutes until our 7 o'clock witching hour or whatever. But
I wanted to clarify something that came up in the discussion, which was about the mixers, the mixing people mixing live. There was no automated mixing consoles in those days, so all of the elements had to be
let me go
both.
back to the
All the elements, I don't need a diagram to say this, all of the elements had to be adjusted in real time, both volume wise and location wise. And each one of these people's work was being separately recorded, right, to its own track to then be.
There's a music mixer, there's a dialogue mixer, and there's an effects mixer. And the dialogue mixer takes precedence. Whomever is mixing what's being spoken on the screen, nothing else can cover that up. That the dialogue is the top dog in the mix crew.
And are they all individually conforming to that so that nobody overrides the dialogue that they're all clearly hearing?
That's what they're supposed to do, and if they get it wrong, then they go back and
do it again.
Readjust it. And they may do a couple of passes, 2 or 3 passes on a 15 to 20 minute reel of film. Historically, usually these were done in 1,000-foot, well, on 35 millimeters, 1,000-foot rolls, which is 11 minutes of picture and sound. And then, of course, there was the big dubbing train. You see that the dubbing train, the chain down here. Let me go to the final pieces. I had some equipment to show you at the very end. Okay, there are the dubbers on the left and the master recorder on the right. And so all the people in this picture, I mean, there's a string of these dubbers, and they all carry something, all edited by all edited reels of sound. And these could be just single channels of stuff, but then they're going to the mixer, and the mixer who has the dialogue reel, he or she is putting it to wherever the dialogue is coming from on screen. And then these other tracks are carrying just, I mean, most of these dubbers are probably mono. And then they're being divided into sent to whatever channel is appropriate for the sound that's being recorded on. In the case of the music score, however, one of these dubbers is probably a 6-channel machine. And so the score, the film score, is probably all in 6 channels. But there may be some extra channels that for solos, and the music mixer there might be some part where he needs to bring up a flute, and so he brings that up and then he brings it back. The one thing about music and dialogue, the human voice and strings do not like each other, and usually you want to bring down the strings if there's a voice on top of it.
So the 6 channels corresponds with 5.1, what we know as 5.1. So the 5 speakers in an arc and then a subwoofer.
No, it does not.
Where does the 6th one go if the 5 speakers are in an
the
arc?
6th channel in historically in 70 millimeter productions or Cinerama was the surround channel, and then there were some control signals on the film that may direct that to some other channel. One of the things I didn't mention about the mag print, and I will go back through to that. This channel here, the very thin little channel, when that track.
What are we looking at here?
Okay, this is a piece of 35 millimeter film with the mag tracks. And this really thin little magnetic stripe over here, which is the surround channel, also contains sometimes a 12 kilohertz signal. And that activates the channel, and then they have to filter out that 12 kilohertz. When the channel is no longer carrying sound, the 12 kilohertz goes away, and the amplifier is squelched or turned off, if you will, to the loudspeakers, so that you will not be hearing hiss in the surround channel.
Yeah, it was a form of tone-coded squelch, just like they use in communications, except instead of using 30 or 40 hertz, they use 12, 14K.
Yeah.
The other thing that in the examples that Rod showed, he showed us some 35 millimeter full coat recording film, and it's mag oxide across the entire surface of that. It started out as 3-channel stuff, and as you pointed out later on, they also did some 6-channel heads for those. And the original recorders were all mechanically synchronized and interlocked frame by frame by frame. And when they go back and actually did the mixing and editing process, they were all, the editing head is all mechanically interlocked, so that it's a sprocket hole for sprocket hole confirmation.
Yeah.
As are the dubbers.
That's the dubber.
That's what the dubbers do.
There's 35 millimeter full coat, 6 tracks on the left, and 75 millimeter print, which is getting its soundtrack recorded on its 6 magnetic channels on the right. So, and the optical and the optical film recorder and sound recorder, Westrex, and a couple of others. Stellavox wanted to get into that business, and then digital came along. And I don't think much of that ever got off the production room floor. But there's the 55 millimeter CinemaScope pull down, if you will. It's combination 35-55 projector, and 6 perforation pull down for the CinemaScope 55, and 4 perforation for the 35 millimeter. So for what interest that might be. There's my home theater. I have 3 speakers behind the screen. There's the screen. The speakers behind the screen on the right is the JBLs. Is the JBL with its cover off And that's what I use behind my home theater screen, which is essentially set up as the way the formula said for CinemaScope and 3 channels behind the screen. So
you've got a 5-channel playback there?
I have a 5-channel, 6-channel, but subwoofer
Yeah, cool.
on the 6th. So
Do you have a film collection?
no, I have some 16 millimeter and 60, and you can see as I unshare, you can see some 16 millimeters on a cart behind me, a Bell and Howell anyway, and I have 2 more sitting underneath. But and some old 16 millimeter prints. I also own a Bolex, and if you're shooting for 3 minutes and you use Eastman color negative, that and 2 work prints, that's about $100 for 3 minutes. I can do much better on my iPad, but still. No, I've had that experience, and I shot football movies in high school, and was occasionally faked out by the plays that would transpire in front of me to the admonishment of the football coach, but still.
Do you have a video projector that lets you project multi-channel video on that screen?
I do have, yes, I do. I do have a video projector, which is essentially a Sanyo LCD projector, and it's
cool.
Probably close to being tossed. I'm beginning to wonder if how long light bulbs are going to be available for it, and it's not all that good. It's only 720p maximum, even though it will show the 1080p discs. There are projectors around at a reasonable price that do much better than what that is, but I haven't quite been motivated to do that yet, and at my current level of income, I better be careful. So anyway.
Not a good time to get carried away.
No. Anyway, okay.
Well, great. Thanks, Rod.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're about 4 minutes after. Any last questions? Otherwise, I hope you found this reasonably interesting in terms of the death of a SMPTE standard and temporary or misguided resurrection of it, if you will, but still.
Yeah, thanks for putting that together.
Yeah, definitely.
Most welcome. And we've got something coming next week, maybe? Or
well, that's my next question. Does somebody have something that you want to present next week? Because we have nothing at this point, and I'm likely not going to be able to put anything together. So,
okay. Well,
not to put anyone on the spot here, Mac, you were talking about doing something there for a while. Is there any chance that could be next week?
Not really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
we're-
you're in the final throes of getting that
Yeah, we're
nailed.
pretty slammed right now.
Okay. Anybody else? We've never suffered from not having a topic, so
No.
that may
And
be
for
the way
our
it
last
works.
meeting for a while, that might just be it,
okay.
Yeah. We'll go out with a whimper, not a bang.
And just as a suggestion, Dan, maybe since a lot of people weren't here today, especially
yeah.
people who are often here, maybe you could throw out potential meeting times on email to everybody.
Yeah.
And also
yeah.
let people know that next week is going to be the last meeting for a while.
Yeah, that was my intention. And I mean, nothing lasts forever. I've known that
Right.
for a long time. And it's been wonderful that we've been able to do this pretty much every single week
Yeah.
for a year and for 13 months, really.
Yeah, really, I agree.
So that's really great. And I'm looking forward to however this evolves. Whether we're able to get back to the same thing, which I can't see as possible if I'm going to work.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
If the COVID thing goes backwards, then who knows? That,
Yeah.
I
I sure
keep hearing
hope
about
not.
the October surprise, so
yeah.
I might get my September festival in before it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hear about this Delta thing that
Yeah, scares
is
the crap out of
apparently
me.
worse, but not bad enough to affect anybody who has specific vaccines,
I
as
also
near as
heard
I
that
can
the
tell.
US just put a bunch of money into research for a treatment pill for when people get it, so that if you get it despite having the vaccine, you can take this. It's not available yet, but they just put a huge amount of money into the research for
Like
this thing. That's,
$3.2 billion.
yeah,
That's,
Yeah.
Huh.
it's,
that's the stuff they pumped Trump up with. when he got-
no, it's a different thing. It's a new thing, I believe. It's like a pill that you just take at home before you get sick enough to like need to go to the hospital, and it keeps you from
Huh.
getting to that point.
Why?
So it's a pretty huge investment, and it apparently is effective against or they believe it's going to be effective against like different strains and stuff like that. So it's really
That's
positive
great.
news.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things I'd heard about some of that medication, there was a documentary on television not too long ago that had repurposed an antipsychotic drug used for mental patients, which was effective in preventing organ failure in COVID patients. And I thought that was kind of strange. But
Interesting.
Are they going to tell us what it is so that if we have some laying around?
I can't remember. They did say what it was, but I can't remember the name of it.
The antipsychotics don't work.
but they feel really good, even though they're sick.
But I haven't had COVID. No.
I hope so.
It wasn't so much preventing COVID. It was some of the after effects of the
Right.
virus that caused organ
The
shutdown,
long
kidney.
COVID for the people who
kidney,
will wind up
Right.
with that as well.
whatnot.
We needed treatment too, because vaccines
Yeah.
not going to prevent everyone from getting sick. My
Yep.
particular concern, real quick, is I'm in a state where if you're over 65, there's a better than average chance that you've received full vaccinations. Statewide's about 65 to 70%, which isn't bad. If you're under the age of 65, it's about 40%. And based on the show I did last night, where, all the right intentions, but they sold 1,000 tickets to a show that by the time they factored in the artists' COVID restrictions and requirements, they only had room for approximately 750 people. And so what do you do with those other 250 people that paid for tickets? The show was essentially sold out. And so, but and I'm glad I'm vaccinated. I'm glad I wore my mask indoors and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But when I look at all those people behind me carrying on like it's 2019 again, and I'm thinking, there's less than a 50-50 chance you, sir, you, ma'am, how about a shave, have been vaccinated. And those are the people who, the political will is not there to shut things down again. What's going to happen is that there's just going to be a lot of folks left to get sick. And my concern is twofold. One, of course, most of us make our living on the discretionary income or spending rather of others. And the other is that the people we work with, most of them are younger. And if they don't work in entertainment, chances are, if they have any vaccine hesitancy, it's going to be tough. I mean, I'm looking at what happens if my crew gets sick. I'm already down 30% in labor anyway. So what happens now if people start getting sick?
Some of it sounds like the old formula for a wedding that you send out 200 invitations, expect 100, and provide for 50.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, so and the other thing is too, I look at the impact of it, even without shutdowns. If if Texas can't put, 80,000 people in Ranger Stadium, what's the economic impact of that? It's partially humanitarian and partially, I don't want to see anybody get sick or die.
Right.
But the economic impact of this could still come back to whop us in the butt months from now. And that's my actual concern, because as discretionary spending type activities, ours are the easiest ones politically to suspend.
Yeah.
And I can't afford to go through this shit one more time. So
we have a big challenge with that in New York because of our space is just so tight here. It's like, if you own a bar, if you can't, and they say, well, your normal capacity is 50 and you can only have 25. It's like, well, you can't make a living when your profit margin is 10%, and there's nowhere to space out, So
well,
I feel you.
And that's kind of what's happening in a lot of places right now. In theory, like the show last night, they sold 1,000 tickets. The venue capacity is about 2,000 from the fire marshal. Stipulated for contracts is 1,900, so it includes staff and artists and all that stuff in the fire marshal count. But these were contracts that were created, several months ago, based on what they thought the health department and the state would allow, which would be 50% capacity. And as it was in this case, it actually worked out to less than that with the artist requirements. But my concern is that we need to get still more shots in more people's arms, both for professional, business, and humanitarian reasons. So I'm hoping it happens that way, because I really don't want to lose the last quarter of this year.
Yeah.
Are they doing a lottery in Kansas like they did in California?
If we do, it's going to be closer to like Virginia, where we give away shotguns or something.
Yeah, free shotgun with your
just
vaccine.
what we need. More guns.
Hey, turkey season's coming up. Hey, 23 years. The Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks was one of my accounts. We did all their public hearings. So I'm pretty well in tune with hunting. Well, what used to be hunting regulations in Kansas, and you might actually get some people to take it if somebody had a chance of winning a shotgun or something, and you probably get sponsors for it.
Shotguns for shots.
Oh, look out!
You laugh, but I kid you not, that would probably be effective.
And we could work out a deal with you guys. All the guns that they're buying back off the street here in New York,
right?
There's a huge gun problem in New York right now, with all kinds of illegal guns coming in. Then we can sell those to Kansas, and then you can give them out to people getting vaccines.
I just think we ought to buy them back and give them back to the military they were stolen from. But that's a whole other New York Times article.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
they are doing a lottery in Seattle, or in Washington rather, and then the top weekly prize I think is $250,000.
Yep.
And the monthly prize is $1 million.
Yep.
Or something.
And they're only doing it for a month, but yeah.
I'm flying out and getting another vaccination.
Yeah, we should just go to all the different states. And
Can I get the Johnson & Johnson and an entry into the lottery, please? I had the AstraZeneca.
Right.
And no.
I've had the Pfizer.
Right.
In the Portland, Oregon area, in Washington County, Oregon, I want to specify that Washington County is in Oregon. They've got $10,000 prizes for vaccine recipients, a resident in that county. So we shall see. But hopefully,
all I got was a damn sticker.
There's a pot dispensary that's getting out a free joint when you get a shot.
Yep.
Oh man, New York just legalized it. We should do that. That'd be great.
There you go.
Yeah. They're doing them here in Seattle. So
no, I thought they were still working it out, because there's a federal issue of getting the vaccine or something for if you have a pot shop.
Oh, I think they might be
give
doing it
out.
like out in front of the shop or something, not in the shop. I can't remember.
My little pot story is that there was a Radio Shack store within walking distance of my home, where I would go to get parts and cables and accessories and replacement ICs. And that, when Radio Shack folded, that became a pot dispensary. I'm wondering, Radio Shack has truly gone to pot.
Oh.
Well, when you were talking about component purchases, I'm thinking, well, you walk in, the store's changed, say, I need a pot. And they go, well, which variety? Instead of saying, oh, will that be log, linear, or audio taper?
Yeah. I'm
Let
hearing
me
somebody with a real strong New York accent saying, I need a part. I need
Yeah.
a pot.
I need
I
a
need a
pot.
pot. Oh, that'd
I
be
need a
Boston.
pot.
I need a pot
Yeah,
with my
yeah.
lobster.
Yeah, yeah.
I
That
guess
would definitely be
Massachusetts.
Boston.
Right.
Boston.
Right.
Okay,
Shall
And
we
we're
call it a
clicking-
day?
Yes.
let's call it a day.
Yes.
Have a
yes.
good
For a
evening.
night
all.
here.
We'll see you.
Have
Yeah,
a
let's call
wonderful
it a night.
evening. Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.
See
Thank
you
you.
next week.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Blah.
Y'all
Bye.
take care. Let's see.